bienvenidos a todos. As Shirley said, my name is Tori Martinez, but I call myself Tori. Everybody calls me Tori. And so tonight is really a celebration and a completion of the oral history research that me and the students conducted over the course of this summer. And really, it was college-level work that these students were conducting. And this is a project that Dr. Waddell, professor of sociology at Adams State University, and I have been working on for the past 2 years. And we have involved college students before, but this is the first time that we have decided to bring in a younger generation. And so middle school and high school students made me a little bit leery about, bringing them up to speed so that they could perform college-level research. But I gotta say, you guys really blew me away. You did an amazing job this summer. They really stepped up to the plate. They pushed themselves. They were dedicated. They persevered. They did what they needed to do to learn the technical skills, the research skills that they needed to be able to do this kind of research. And so I have to say they really impressed me. You should be very proud of your sons and your daughters. As part of going out and interviewing San Luis residents and residents in the surrounding area, we also wanted to go a little bit further into our research. And so we brought in Dennis Lopez, and he is a teacher at Adams State University and a local historian. And so he was a huge part of helping us conduct our research because he helped us learn where the culture, where the language came from, and just kind of trace that through history, and helped us really understand why Valley Spanish and Spanish in the Upper Rio Grande area is different than the Spanish dialect that's spoken really anywhere in the world. And so Dennis was an integral part of that. He wasn't able to be here with us tonight, but we really appreciate everything that he's been doing, and he's really helping your students become trilingual. So our research topic over the course of the summer was really looking into the language loss, the loss of the Spanish language in the San Luis and surrounding area. We wanted to be able to understand what happened to that language and why this generation has lost that language and some of their culture. And so what you see here were some of the findings that we discovered during the course of our research. And what the students found was that their grandparents' generation struggled with English. So they spoke mainly Spanish. And then they found that their parents' generation were punished for speaking Spanish in school and for various reasons. And because of that, their parents didn't pass on the language to them. And so their generation has lost the Spanish language and much of that culture that goes with it. So the students that I worked with this summer are Alexandria Taylor, Rosa Mondragon, Wendy Navarro, and James Atencio. And I just want to take a moment to say a little bit about each of the students. I really enjoyed working with Alexandria because she has such passion for preserving her Spanish culture, preserving the Spanish language, and the way she just went full force to learn the language and really grasp it. And Rosa, she's one of the funnest students I've ever worked with, and I really truly hope that she carries that spirit with her for the rest of her life. She told us that she will never grow up and she will always be a child, and I hope you do keep that childlikeness because she made everything that we did really, really fun. And Wendy was a very interesting student to work with because Wendy is at that place where she's caught between three worlds. So her parents came from Mexico, and so they speak the Spanish that is spoken there. And then she came to school where they speak predominantly English, and so she had to learn the English language. And then she lives in a community where the words that they use are very different than the words that her parents use. And so she struggled with that transition, and she struggled with being able to translate those words and make sense of them. And so I'm really proud of Wendy because I think Dennis has helped her a lot to become trilingual and be able to tell the differences. And I really, really like, we were in the class one day and she said that she thinks that the Spanish that we speak here is really, really unique and very special. So thank you for that. And James Atencio is new to San Luis. And so what I appreciate most about working with James is that he just was so eager and so willing to jump into the community and learn about the people here, learn about the culture here, and really eager to just hear their stories and just absorb everything that he was hearing. And so he struggled a little bit with the Spanish language, but he's coming along slowly but surely, and we're really proud of James, and it's been great working with him too. So as I mentioned earlier, the overall project is part of the Voices of the Valley project that Dr. Waddell and I have been working on for the past 2 years. And we've been able to get grants over the last few years to keep the project going, and we hope to continue it and learn more about the history and the culture and the language and just the uniqueness that is the San Luis Valley. So what you see here is after the first year of us conducting our research with our college students, we were able to create a short documentary about the struggle for land and water that exists, that has happened throughout the San Luis Valley. And so if anybody's interested, that is on YouTube, and that is also available for you to watch. So we talked to several different residents. The 3 videos that you're about to see were videos that the students helped me conduct, and they interviewed all together. And so Shirley was kind of their guinea pig for their first interview. And she was very understanding about the learning process, and the students did a great job. They were very professional with her. And so the 3 clips you're about to see are Shirley and Dana Maestas and Lillian Gomez. And the students didn't help me with the interview with Lillian Gomez, but I include that, even though it was a previous interview I did, because they all speak about the language and the loss of the language here in the San Luis area.
What discriminations did you experience as a child?
So during the 8th grade, we had a nun, Sister Alice, who was one of our teachers, and she was very clear that we were not to speak Spanish in her class. So of course, I ended up speaking Spanish, and I ended up getting scolded, and that to me was probably my first dealings with discrimination in terms of speaking my own language.
So why isn't the Spanish language carried on to this generation?
Well, I think that our language was lost not with your generation, but with a previous generation, and even with my generation. I'm very fortunate that I'm bilingual. That's one of the greatest assets that I have, that I can speak and write and communicate both in Spanish and in English. And I truly believe that the main reason that your generation and your parents' generation no longer speak Spanish is because we were made to be ashamed of speaking the Spanish language. In this country, it's so different from the rest of the world. In this country, what is promoted is monolingualism, which is you speak English and only English, because that is supposed to be the official language of this country. However, in the other parts of the world, if you are a bilingual person or a trilingual person, someone who can speak more than 1 or 2 or 3 languages, you are considered a very intelligent person and a very resourceful person, because there are more than 1 language that's spoken in the world. However, in this country, because of the racism that exists, we lost that. Let me give you an example. Many of our parents didn't teach us Spanish because they didn't want us to suffer. The example that I gave earlier about the nun that would punish me, that would embarrass me, that would put me in the corner or send me home or call my parents to tell them I was a bad student, which I wasn't, all because I spoke Spanish, made you feel inferior, made you feel like you were less than. They made you feel like if you were someone who spoke Spanish, that you were dumb, that you were stupid. Well, it's quite the opposite. I've learned as an adult that the individual who can speak more than 1 language is worth the position of 2 people.
I think when you lose your language, you lose the basic part of your culture and who you are. And I don't know if maybe their parents weren't really taught to speak, or there wasn't a need for them to speak, or they wasn't really taught in school. So maybe that language just wasn't passed on. I know sometimes, I think in this small community, because we're so isolated, I think that maybe some people thought that it was better to learn to speak English to get ahead and to go to college. and without being discriminated against for speaking Spanish, maybe. But it's interesting now that so many people speak many different languages. And I think the Americas probably, or the United States, is one of the only countries in the world that they speak English, and unless you're assimilated or you come in from another country and can speak another language, they don't really teach you to speak other languages. And because I know in Europe, if you're Italian, you speak English, everybody learns how to speak English. And if you're surrounded by other countries like Spain or Austria, you learn to speak the languages little kids in Europe speak like 3 or 4 different languages. And because that's how they're brought up. And the countries that are so close, it's like us going to Wyoming or California, where if you travel to California and you're in Italy and then you're in Germany. So you kind of need to learn to speak several different languages just to travel within that area. And I think it's important that the United States teaches kids how to speak other languages, even when you're older, even now. I think it's important for you to learn, especially if you want to travel, and there's just such a diverse community in the whole world that speaks so many languages. Your language is the root of your culture and who you are, and how you communicate and how you can relate to your ancestors.
So going into kindergarten and not knowing a word of English was frightening. And so I know that I watched the teacher at every moment. If she turned her face to me, or I couldn't see the words that were coming out of her mouth or her expressions, my understanding completely in English was diminished. We were at a time that Spanish was not allowed to be spoken in K-12 schools, right? So I was told very young that if they caught me speaking Spanish at school, I would be charged 50 cents for every word of Spanish that I spoke. So it really silenced me as a young child, right? Because I very quickly did the math and said, oh my goodness, my father only earns $2 a day. A complete sentence will diminish my family's resources. I can't do that. So I remember really being silenced and continuing to learn the language. But by the time I hit 6th or 7th grade, I was a pretty fluent English speaker.
So Spanish and the language wasn't the only thing that we researched. We researched the culture that surrounds that language. And so now what I'm going to do is turn it over to my students. And they're going to tell you who they interviewed and what they learned through that interview. And then they're going to share just a small clip of their interview with you. So, Wendy?
Antes de empezar, quiero dar gracias a Tori Martinez, y Dennis Lopez. Before I start this, I want to give thanks to Tori, Shirley, and Dennis. Mi nombre es Wendy Navarro, mis padres son Ana Navarro y Martín Navarro. Yo tengo 13 años, estoy en el grado 8. My name is Wendy Navarro. My parents are Ana Navarro and Martín Navarro, and I am 13 years old, and I am also in 8th grade.
Things I learned through the project is how we have our language loss, how kids from our generation don't really speak Spanish because of their parents didn't want to embarrass them in school. I also learned how a young person like me can do something so important like this as a college student. And for me, it's very much because I'm acting like a college student would. And the things I learned through the technology is how to set up the camera and how easy it is to break it, and also the lighting and the microphone. The things I learned from Spanish class is the Valley Spanish. The Valley Spanish for me is very unique because they use different words for the Spanish. And also I learned academic Spanish, which came from my mother and father. And in Valley Spanish, manito and manita means brother and sister, but in academic Spanish, hermana and hermano means brother and sister. Who I interviewed was my mom, Ana. She is 38 and she lives in Colorado. Where I interviewed her was in her greenhouse. And her kids are me, my sister, my older brother, and my younger brother. My older sister is named Selena. My older brother is named Jose, and my youngest brother is named Martin. My mom, she grew up in Guanajuato. She was born in Guanajuato, and when she turned 9, she moved to Michoacan, and she was growing up there. She lived there until she was 17, but when she was 16, she lost 2 kids. They were twins, and one was a boy and one was a girl. That's why she came here to America, and I'm grateful for that, because if I lived in Mexico, I wouldn't really have an opportunity like I do here. For my mom to travel here is a big part of pretty much my culture, because it talks about how my parents came here. And my mom, 6 months after she lost her kids, she was about 17, and she took the journey to come here. My mom and 38 people were brave enough to come here to America and to live a better life. It took them about 10 days to travel, and they were with the coyote. That's a person that teaches the people, well, not teaches, but takes the people from Mexico to here. And when she arrived to America, it took 27 people to arrive here, and the other people got taken by the migra, or they just lost their way through the mountains. With the experience of that for my mom, she works hard, because she knows that for her family it's very important, and for me that's a big deal, because my mom is my hero. She means a lot to me because she took the risk to coming here from Mexico, and it's really important. For one, she loves San Luis. She loves the people. It reminds her of home. She gets support. She made us come here to the mountains, and she lets us come to school. You can start the video. ¿Se siente conectado con la comunidad de San Luis?
Sí, muchísimo,
¿Y por qué?
porque son unas grandes personas. Cuando llegué a este país, fue el primer lugar que llegué y todos me dieron su apoyo, me ayudaron, porque yo no sabía nada, absolutamente nada, ni inglés. Ahora comprendo poco inglés, pero antes ellos me ayudaban mucho, como hablan español también, y los veo como si fueran mi otra familia. Hay mucha diferencia entre México y América, que es que en México el clima es diferente al lugar que estamos aquí, que en México todo el año puedes tener, hay mucho plantíos de vegetales, árboles de frutas, y la diferencia es que aquí no tenemos muchas cosas que en México pueden crecer en el tiempo de verano y todo el año, y aquí nada más es en verano.
In those 2 short clips, my mom was talking about the differences between Mexico and America, and also about how she loves San Luis pretty much. And in the first one, it talks about how she loves San Luis, and she says that the people gave her support, and right here she feels like it's her family, because they pretty much helped her with all of my sisters, my brothers, and for me, I love San Luis too, because they helped me a lot, and it's really important to have a community like this. Like, if you go somewhere else, there's nowhere like this. That's why people come back. And in the other video, it talks about the differences between Mexico and America, and right there, my mom told me that the climate's different because it's like really hot there, and for me, my mom's my biggest hero. Now I pass it over to Sandra.
Hola, me llamo Alejandra Evarista Taylor. Tengo 13 años, estoy en el grado 8. Mis padres son Aaron y Pamela Taylor, mis abuelos son Lidia y Orlando Taylor y Oliver y Esther Manzanares. So there I said, my name is Alexandria Evarista Taylor. I am 13 years old and I am going to be in the 8th grade. My parents are Arian and Pam Taylor, and my grandparents are Oliver and Esther Manzanares and Lidia and Orlando Taylor. So before I start my presentation, I'd like to give a big thanks to Tori Martinez, Dennis Lopez, Shirley Romero, and especially my parents and my grandparents for all the support you give. From this project, I learned that our language was lost when past generations weren't allowed to speak Spanish, or they would be looked down on, be embarrassed, or they would be punished. In some places, you would have to pay 50 cents for every word that you spoke. So people back then couldn't afford to speak any Spanish, or their parents would go in debt. In Shirley's interview especially, she talks about one of her teachers named Sister Alice. Whenever she spoke Spanish, she would get in trouble, and Sister Alice would call Shirley's parents and tell them that she was a bad student, which she wasn't. She just had an advantage that others didn't. From this project, besides all of that I learned from the research, I also learned that lighting is so important, because if you don't have the correct lighting, you could get funny glares, and people don't like when you give them funny pictures. In Spanish, I learned that the Spanish we speak isn't improper, it's just our own dialect. Our dialect of Spanish is so unique that anywhere else in the world, nobody speaks it. It's just in the Upper Rio Grande region, and I think we need to be very proud of the language we speak. Until I looked at the differences between academic and archaic Spanish, I finally realized that we are different, and that's okay, because we understand each other, and that's all that matters, right? So my great-grandmother, Adela Manzanares, is the person I interviewed. She's going to be 95 years old, and she lives in San Pablo, Colorado. Her interview took place in front of her old wood stove in her kitchen in San Pablo. She has 11 kids, 19 grandkids, and 24 great-grandkids. In the first clip I'll show you, she talks about how our Spanish language is like a religion. It's sacred to us and to our town. So we need to treasure that. So I turn it over to you.
I started learning English better because we left here, I was only 10 years old, and I got to go to a country school, and I had real good teachers. And because I only, like I say, I went through the 5th grade, and that was I couldn't go because we were laborers, we worked beats, and me too. From 10 years on, I was out, not doing a whole lot, but I was out in the fields anyway. And so I didn't get to go. I loved school. I really liked it, but there was no way. I am very happy to be Spanish. That's what we spoke when, before they went to school. Once they went to school, and then I learned in school, I learned English, so I talked to them, English, and they learned both English and Spanish. Because it's our religion, Spanish is our religion. I do think it's Spanish. It's nice, and I know a lot of kids don't speak Spanish anymore because it's not spoken at home, right?
So in my grandma's interview, in this clip, I learned that the Spanish language isn't just a language to the people here, or to her especially. It's something that can never be replaced. It's unique and it's ours. So in the second clip, she talks about when they used to pedir Christmas. So I like this especially because my dad, he always takes me to his Christmas, and I think that's a really cool tradition that I think we should still have here. Just because it's our generation doesn't mean anything needs to stop.
Well, it was Christmas time, and the mamas made empanaditas or whatever, and if you had a little money, I guess you kind of bought goodies like candy and stuff for the kids that used to go out. And you know, pedir Christmas is what they used to say, you know. Yeah. But that's gone. Miss Christmas, you know, because over here everybody mostly was Spanish. There wasn't that much of English in it, you know. And yeah, you went and knocked on the door and they would open and give you some candy or whatever they had, empanaditas or, you know. Yeah. That was the old days.
So the clips that I showed you, my grandma doesn't talk about my favorite parts, and my favorite part was when she said what family means to her and what religion means to her, because I have the same values. That's it, and thank you for your time, and I'd like to pass the microphone off to Rosa Marie.
Hola, me llamo Rosa María Modrón. Mis padres son Dwight y Kerian Modrón. Tengo 13 años. Estoy en el grado 8. What I said was, hi, my name is Rosa Modrón. My parents are Dwight and Kerian Modrón. I am 13 years old. What I learned from this project was how kids of this generation don't speak Spanish just because our parents' were not really taught, and they didn't really teach our parents to speak Spanish because they didn't want their kids to be discriminated and they didn't want them bullied. And what I also learned with the interviewing process is how with sound, everything that you make, little tapping noises, anything with powerful microphones, they can catch it all, and it's kind of bad with the interview part. What I learned in the differences in the Valley Spanish and the academic Spanish were there are a lot of different meanings that the words can mean. You can say one word and people can take it entirely differently. And there are two complete different meanings. In my interview, I have interviewed a local artist here in San Luis. Some of you may know him, some of you may not, but his name is Roberto Meslas. He is a local artist here. He helped work on the statues for the Station of the Cross Shrine. And he talks about in this video how budding artists are an artist at heart and how he encourages artists to become one. Before I like to start the video, I would like to take a special shout out to Tori, Shirley, and Mr. Dennis. They helped me learn all that I learned here this summer, and I'm grateful for that.
I would suggest that if you're a budding artist and you're truly an artist, and myself, I would recognize that from when you're 3 or 4 years old. Budding or not, an artist is that. It's not something you make, it is something that you become, and you are. But if you want to really be an artist, you got to work hard. You got to be diligent, and there's studio time, and that is sacred. You know, when you're in the studio, you're creating. If you have friends over, you're still creating. If you have people over, you're still making your stuff. You're surrounded by your art. And you think all this came from just, well, it's just a hobby. And a lot of people think it's a career, it's a job. But when I retired, I want to be an artist. But I knew I had to work very hard. So you had to work very hard. And as a Hispanic, or in our culture, you got to work twice as hard. But that's what makes us incredible, because then we have a lot more to give. My mom told me once, he goes, to get an even footing in this world, you have to work twice as hard as your white counterpart. You're gonna have to prove yourself to be better in ability and knowledge, because they're given the first opportunity for everything. You gotta fight for yours, you gotta earn it. So, but if you do that, it comes to you. I believed her. You know, it's true. I go, when you leave the valley, I'll tell you what, nobody gives you anything. You have family to support you here. Once you leave, you don't. The support's gone. You're on your own. And you better well know what you're doing, what you're talking about, and most of all, what you really want.
That's all I have for now. Now I would like to turn this stage over to James.
Hola, me llamo Jaime Tento. Hello, my name is James. I'm 16 and I'll be going to 10th grade. My grandparents are Paul and Rita Martinez from Capuline. It has been an honor working here with Tori Martinez and Dennis Lopez. I've learned so much in so little time. What we learned from this program is why this younger generation lost their language culture. One thing that we thought that this younger generation lost their language is because their parents didn't pass on their language, Spanish language culture. In the Spanish class that we are taking, we are trying to find our language back that we lost. The Spanish that we are learning is academic and Valley Spanish. The video you are about to see, it took time and effort, like setting the camera and preparing the person to be interviewed. The person I interviewed was Rocky Madrid. He is 70 years old and he is from San Acacio. What he's about to talk about in his video is why he changed himself to the cattle guard, to the Sierra. They were fighting for the land rights so people from San Luis could have used the Sierra. You can pass it on to the video now.
I still believe in what's happening over here in La Sierra. I've been involved with the land grant issue since I can remember, but my grandfather in 1960 was one of the first people to become plaintiffs along with Apolinar Rael and Juan Lacombe and some other elders to file a lawsuit against Taylor. The logging was just going to destroy the watershed. Everybody in agriculture in San Acacio, and Chama, and El Rito, starting in El Rito and going all the way down to San Acacio, depends on the water from this mountain back here. And by cutting the trees, you cut the canopy. So the sun hits the snow and it melts it in February and March. And instead of having any water to irrigate in June, July, and August, the snow has melted. By that point, by early spring, there's no more water left. So a lot of people had to quit farming and leave the area. A lot of people have gone out and become educated and left the area because of lack of opportunities in the area. And then retired and have come back. Some have come back to live here and have done a lot of work because this was a land grant. So it was a violation of a treaty that we had signed with Mexico, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And David Martinez, being a very well-educated scholar, started a newspaper called La Cucaracha. And he started educating the community about the abuse of the land grant by Taylor. I don't know how many decades it's going to take before we ever see harvesting sized timber ever grow back on La Sierra. It won't be in my lifetime. Probably won't be in yours either. So it's going to be a long time before we fix the damage that was done by logging. At that time, I did something that I normally do peacefully and with nonviolence. I chained myself down to a cattle guard, metal cattle guard that was designed by a local engineer, who I'm very proud to say is my friend. And he designed the cattle guard so that there was no way they could take me out without cutting the cattle guard and cutting my head off at the same time. And then I was elected to get chained down to the cattle guard. So we made a lock box where I could stick my hand in and lock myself with a chain around my wrist, and then throw a carabiner and lock it inside this lock box which was 2 tubes about this big around, just enough for my hands and my arms to fit in. There was no way the cops could get to it. There's no way they could get to it and try to unlock me. So for 77 hours, they finally gave up in frustration and called the Alamosa Rescue Squad to come and get me out. But what happened was that in that 77 hours, chaining myself to a cattle guard, the media says, if it bleeds, it leads. So, you know, when you chain yourself to a cattle guard like that, the possibility of one of those logging trucks running over me was very real. It was a very distinct possibility.
I hope this program continues because it's been educational, interesting, and fun. We interviewed some interesting people. I'm glad I joined this program because I now know the girls you see. They've been funny, interesting, and amazing friends. Thank you, girls. You're welcome.
So before we end tonight, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that we interviewed. Thank you for welcoming us into your homes. Rocky, thank you for going up to La Sierra with us. We had an amazing time. We got to know each other. We got to know this community. We got to know its history and some of its stories. And it's all very unique and very special, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you all for coming here tonight. Before we conclude, I want to give my students their certificate of completion, and along with that, they also get their paycheck, so I'm sure they're very happy about that as well. So, Wendy Navarro. Alexandria Calor. Rosa Maria Mondragon. And Jaime Atencio. So that concludes our program for tonight. Thank you everybody for coming and for all of your support. We appreciate it.